Peter, we've talked a little about Francis Bacon and Shakespeare. We've also talked about the Gemini effect, which encompasses this. Can you explain to us more about the two Shakespeares, or the Gemini effect within the Shakespeare story?
Yes, you'll find with Shakespeare, all the Shakespeare plays bring in the Gemini effect. I mean, that's what the author is so brilliant at, putting together the opposites, hot and cold, red and white in the poems and so on. But in the plays, you've got all these opposites playing about. And in the comedies, they're trying to find, they do find their harmony out of love, because they're working with love, basically.
Yes.
And the tragedies are when love isn't being used, and so you get the real tragic results, because it's not loving. Although Shakespeare always manages to bring in some sort of love. Love is the spirit, the divine energy, and it usually comes in through music, or very often the tragedy through a woman brings it in as the healer. And that's sometimes a man, but more often a woman. Well, the Shakespeare plays started to appear around about 1592 onwards, as far as can be found out, from records. And that's actually a time when Anthony Bacon came back from France and joined Francis Bacon.
Yes.
And they teamed up with the Earl of Essex and his group, with the Countess of Pembroke and Southampton, the Earl of Southampton and so on.
Yeah.
And they were the patrons of all the poets involved, really, with what became the Shakespeare plays. So in a sense you could say they were patrons of Shakespeare, only I don't think that was the actor, personally.
Yes.
I think the actor was brought in because he was an actor, he's a businessman, and he could get the plays put on stage.
Yeah.
And the company that eventually ended up putting on all the Shakespeare plays, nowadays we call it Shakespeare's Company.
Yes.
But at the time it was Lord Chamberlain's company. Before that there were about 2 or 3 companies that belonged to the noblemen in this circle, Essex Circle. We call it Mary Sidney's Circle.
Yes.
And they used to meet at a lot of Essex House and elsewhere. So the Bacon brothers were fully involved with this, and they were gathering in all their intelligence across Europe to work with as a whole history of knowledge to work with, and observing human nature and so on. And so you got the 2 brothers coming together at a time when there were 2 novas appeared in Cassiopeia again, which is
in the sky.
In the sky, that's the constellation that's called the Virgin Queen.
Yes.
And when 2 new stars appear, it's said she's given birth on Earth to this light, this expression of light, in one way or another.
So this would have been seen as being, a huge sort of portent of something.
A huge portent, yes. So you've got the 2 brothers, very suitable for the Gemini symbolism, coming together, both of them known as poets.
Yes.
And they get together. They would start off at Gray's Inn, where they both had chambers.
Yes.
And but they also had other houses to work in, and started the whole Shakespeare thing off. And they employed a team of poets and historians and others, and amanuenses. Those are scribes who write write down from dictation. So they had a whole office for this, for poetry, and also for intelligence work. And so they got a whole Shakespeare group, and you've got the earls and countesses and so on also meeting and so on. You can imagine the inspiration flowing around, the ideas and sharing stories and so on. Just amazing.
So it's a very, very learned circle.
Learned circle. And so when Venus and Adonis came out, it's the first poem, what's called the first heir of Shakespeare's work, his firstborn. It's got the symbols of the Gemini in that, but both in a headpiece, and the AA symbol is also the Gemini idea too.
So this was very deliberately
deliberate.
with.
And Venus and Adonis is the male and female opposite schemes, the lovers, who actually, as Venus and Adonis don't get it quite right, whereas Venus and Mars do get it right, but Mars is an immortal, and Adonis is not, he's a mortal. But it's Venus, the goddess, is immortal.
Yeah.
Adonis is the mortal.
Yeah.
But they are, well, she's trying very hard to love, and he's
Yeah.
not quite getting it.
Usually the other way around.
Because he goes off and hunts the boar, 'cause he thinks that's more interesting, and
Yes.
gets himself killed. You know? Story of everyone,
Yes.
mortal life, isn't
Yes, it is. You can't sort of miss the point.
But there you've got the Gemini theme right from the start.
Yeah.
And then the next poem about Rape of Lucrece is a similar thing in a different way. But that brings in the idea of, because of what she goes through, it leads to the overthrow of the Tarquins, the terrible tyrants of Rome, and introduces the Roman Republic.
Yeah.
So it's about, even though something horrible has happened, anti-love, really.
Yes. Yeah.
But yet that still leads to a revolution which brings in something better than before.
Yeah.
So it's the same Gemini theme, but in a different way of putting it. Yeah, there you are. Start off with
Yes, that's the beginning
the beginning of the Shakespeare thing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that, Peter. Fascinating.